And we're back after like 3 years of a hiatus. After a 3-year hiatus of unplanned, maybe hiatus. I don't know. I don't know. We're we have cameras and microphones that we shouldn't have been given again to talk about cybersecurity.
I feel like hiatus, the word itself is like you just sometimes you just got to go.
Yeah, it's because it's Latin.
Yeah,
it's because it's Latin. There's one thing I've learned this week with old Pope passing, new Pope being discovered elected. It's that we still have Latin, and I still don't know it. And they said, hey, the new Pope addressed everyone in Italian first, and that's really great. And I was like, I thought that was Latin, and that just shows that I don't know many languages, dead or living.
Well, but if you know Latin, you know all of the Romance languages, right? Either way, Latin.
I have been called romantic, so
they got to keep Latin around so the doctors can sound smart.
Yeah,
I mean, that's basically what it comes down to.
So because whenever they scribble now, they're like, no, it's just Latin.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a great way to start this back off.
Yes.
Yeah, we already lost
Welcome back.
half of the listeners. Welcome back. It's not Latin class. It's cyber, but maybe it's Latin. Anyway, welcome back to our podcast. Welcome to Legitimate Cybersecurity, or at least that's what we're calling it now. It might change. I don't know, but it might stay the same. Half of this is being run just by AI anyway, so we're going to follow trends given to us by computers. For those of you who are new, sorry, other channel, change it. My name's Frank Downs, and I'm here with Dustin Brewer. We've been in cybersecurity for almost 20 years now, and have spent probably half that time working together. What would you say? Over 10 years together at this point.
Oh, yeah. I would do the math right now, but I don't want to. So
it might make us feel older, appropriately older. But yeah, it's good to see you, Dustin. Thanks for doing this. I'm glad we get back together. So the goal here is welcome to the show. We're going to talk about a few things that we've been identifying in cybersecurity for, I'll say, since we left. And we've got a bunch of topics that we want to talk about for the greater community. If you're interested in any of the stuff that we're talking about, you can send us some topics that you're interested in. I guess I'll attach my email somewhere. I don't know. This is brand new. We'll figure it out. If not, you just, I think you'll find us.
If not, we won't.
Determined people. Yeah. Determined people find us, which is weird still sometimes. Anyway. So today we're going to start the discussion with patching, something that Dustin, I think you and I have both noticed over, our entire career, is that patching is never going to stop. I think I'm really interested in your take on this, because we live in, no matter what we do for cybersecurity, and even both you and I, right, work in the field, in specifically the subset of the field called proactive, right? Mm-hmm. Proactive cybersecurity, the goal there being, let's make things so robust right now that you won't have an incident. It doesn't matter how proactive you are. At the end of the day, there's so much reaction to the environment because, attackers and hackers are always going to find different ways to exploit systems, right? There's always people out there who are willing to work really, really hard to gain access, funds, or anything else illegitimately, right? So instead of trying to do something legally, they'll work a little hard to do it illegally. And so we've got to always react to that. And that kind of responds to patching, whether it's that, right? Or whether it's because there was a fat finger with the code, you still need patching. And so something I wanted to bring up is I would really like your thoughts as to why you think we still suck at it. Because patching, I feel like patching is this kind of experience where no matter how hard we try to work to, one, implement it, there's always been Patch Tuesday with Microsoft, or Update Tuesday, whatever you want to call it. And then whether you try to schedule it the right way, whether you try to automate it, whether you try to prioritize it, it's still bad. We're still not good at it. And I'm really curious what your thoughts are, especially since you work with a team that does a lot of hands-on patching every day. I'd really like to know your thoughts. So what's your take on it, and why aren't we good at it still?
I think the answer it's more fundamental than that. And it's that we aren't really good at cybersecurity yet. And in a way, we've never really been good at security in general. And now we're having to kind of branch out into this this ethereal technological plane of, like, here's now we have to be secure in this area too, right? Of these things that we made that are supposed to be supposed to help us communicate, supposed to help us conduct business, in many ways. And for some reason, we keep getting but now the bad guys want to get a hold of something, but also security researchers want to make a name for themselves. So
Word.
when a new exploit comes out, for example, Spectre and Meltdown, which I know is years and years old. I'm probably dating myself just by even mentioning them. Google released a white paper on that, right? We don't know whether it was used in the wild before. Probably not, but maybe. But either way, it was first published by Google
Right.
and some security researchers from some universities. So why we still suck at it, and again, this goes I think deeper into. I'm going to get a little PhD on you here.
You should. Soon to be Dr. Brewer. Give us a good word.
Someday. It goes deeper into that, and it's more about like human behavior and how we actually view things, and whether what the value we truly place on uh, staying secure is. Now, we all want to stay secure, and if you're a CISO, you want to stay secure because you don't want to get fined. You don't want to get in trouble. You don't want to with law, you also want to stay within budget, right? So you've got a couple of different reasons there, and I'm sure I'm going to get some people coming back that are like, no, 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 I love cybersecurity. That's why I'm a CISO, and that's fantastic. Anecdotally, that's not what I've seen in the field, right? I've seen people who are like, nope, we want to stay within the confines of our budget, lower if possible, and we want to check a box in a checkbox because we have other important things that we have to get to. And fair enough.
Right.
Absolutely no judgment there. Or am I saying that, you're a bad CISO if you do that versus a CISO who's actually, like cyber from cyber, if you will. But that's really what it comes down to. And I still would say that budget constraints are probably number one as to why we still suck at this. We either don't want to pay the talent that we need to pay, or we don't want to pay the programmer who has to come in and reprogram something because it's something that's unfixable, or is using something older, right? That older libraries or whatever it is. And so that's why we still suck at this. I don't I still it is somewhat of a accepted uh it's an accepted focus within the C-suite, but it's not the focus of the C-suite, right? There are a million other things that a business has to think about on a daily basis, regardless of their cybersecurity risks, right? Or their vulnerabilities that are currently out there. And so when you're like, hey, we've got this browser extension that actually is, okay, we're going to push that to the back here because it's just not, it's an acceptable risk, or it's something that we just don't want to spend a lot of money on. If that makes sense.
No,
That's usually what I see anecdotally again.
I agree with you, because you do see that. I think, just like anything, this field is one no one wants to do cyber. A business doesn't want to have to do cybersecurity. Why? Because it costs business. Cybersecurity is always a cost center, right? And
Yeah.
so the reason they're doing cybersecurity is because they either have to, which gets to your point of compliance, or because they do not want to. The cost of an incident would be greater than the cost of just implementing cybersecurity. So I think you make an excellent point there. I mean, as much as so many of us want to do cyber for cyber's sake, because we love cyber and we feel called to it, right?
Yep.
And as much as anyone feels called to anything, the reality of the situation is it is not something that people aren't going to pay you to do cyber out of the goodness of their heart, right? And cybersecurity doesn't happen just because it's a good idea. It is a good idea, but it doesn't. Good ideas don't fund things, right? So I really like that. Something else I'd add to it too is I think the increased level of interconnectivity is a big problem as well. I don't like to say problem, but consideration with the patching situation. Looking at, say, 20 years ago versus now, or even 10 years ago versus now, so much more is connected. I was reading an article the other day. There are now dishwashers that when you purchase them, you can't use them until you connect them to the internet. And it's either Bosch or Whirlpool. I can't remember which one. But there are now dishwashers that will not let you wash dishes until you connect to the Wi-Fi, and it performs a registration. They say it enables, I think it's like AI or something. Cool, right? But honestly, I'm going to be perfectly honest. There's certain things that don't need to be connected to the internet, and I think dishwashers are one of them. I'm a dishwasher. I'm not connected. Well, I physically, like, I mean, I have a lot of
You're
things
on the
that
internet
connect me
right
to the
now.
internet, but like my body, is not necessarily connected to the internet. However,
Yeah.
and I think that all those variations of things, it gets the bigger IoT point. You can't keep track of everything all the time and all the different builds, all the different forks of Linux, all the different variations, all the different dependencies. Not yet, anyway, right? So there's always going to be something that's exploitable and something that's going to be out there that can be taken advantage of, needing patching.
Yes. Yes. Now, I will say, if a dishwasher had true AI with it and could actually do my dishes for me,
Great.
I would plug that into the internet and no questions asked. You know, one of the adages that I see starting to pop up, or it's been popping up for a few years now, is if you're in IT, you don't have anything smart, in your house because you understand how volatile those systems are. That actually, between you and I, definitely is not the case. I know that for sure, and for most people I talk to in our business, we actually still adhere we still kind of I'd say maybe not early adopters, but we're still adopters of the technology of IoT,
Yeah.
regardless of us consistently being in customers networks and seeing the detrimental effect that some of these IoT devices can have on your
100%.
risk profile, or on your risk register, and what you're and what you need to worry about on a regular basis. But yeah, no, you're right, and you hit the nail on the head. It's it's a lot of different things, and I don't. The other thing that we have kind of going on is we have a lot. You mentioned interoperability. We have a lot of different systems out there that can do a lot of different things, right? If you have your E5 license, you've got all these different permissions for all these great utilities that you can use in regular everyday cybersecurity life, including vulnerability information, right? And there has been this progression, and we still see some folks who request, like, well, we want to do our vulnerability scans once a quarter, right? Because that's what we do. You do a vulnerability scan once a quarter. You go in there, you prioritize the remediations. You have an entire quarter, entire 3 months to do those remediations. You go and do those remediations, and then you do your scan again, and that's what those. Now you have your new prioritizations, and that's not how things are happening anymore. We have these agent based utilities that are reporting back on 4 hour, 6 hour, 12 hour basis, and so you have
Right.
real time data. Which it makes things more secure to an extent, but it complicates things to no end, because now you have prioritizations changing on a minute by minute basis, possibly, right? Or on an hour by hour basis. So now what are you supposed to do? So it's a very complex issue, and we see uh folks who are in more on the IT risk or IT audit side, trying to reconcile that with the business side of things. And that's a really tough thing to do. Most of the time, if we run into somebody who has a risk register, it's not integrated with the main risk register, right, of an organization. Like,
Yes.
big
Yes. All the time.
business has risk register, IT has risk register, and it's not, it's just not. They're not always connected, which is unfortunate because they are all business risks for the most part.
I'd go further and say even IT has different risk registers too. It's not just business has a risk register and then IT has a risk register, because IT will have a risk register, then you'll have cyber's risk register. And within that, somewhere in there is like a vulnerability management risk register, which I want to talk to you about later, right? I agree with you 100% there. There's rarely consolidated risk registers.
Right. And like I think I've been saying this for years, but like the movie The Watchmen,
Yes.
with Rorschach, where he's like he's thrown in prison. He's like, I don't think you guys understand it. I'm not in here with you. You're all in here with me. Like, there's been this shift of this IT, this digital transformation to business side, where like business is like, okay, IT, you're in the room with us now, and it's like, no, 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 you're in the room with us now, because you cannot conduct a business in a modern. For the most part, there are certainly businesses out there where you don't need a digital presence. Not very many left. So if you need to conduct business in the world today, in this economy that we have, you've got to do it. And you've got to have some kind of digital presence, which means you have to have some kind of cybersecurity practice, which means you have to have some kind of vulnerability management practice.
I agree. And anytime you can bring in a Zack Snyder reference, I'm going to be a big fan of that too. Those of you who
So,
haven't seen Watchmen, great movie, which shouldn't be a controversial statement, but is. Uh, Fantastic film. Not for kids, Just heads up.
Yeah.
They
Any
may or may
children listening to this podcast, first of all, go listen to
yeah.
something way more interesting.
Also, yeah, if you're a kid listening to us, I'm sorry. Like, it took a lot to get here, and I'm sure that road was rough. So,
Oh my
but
goodness.
congratulations on your brilliance and
Yes,
taste in
100%.
podcasts. Yeah. So there you go. I like that a lot because you brought up a lot there that I think kind of bleeds into another topic I want to talk to you about, which is vulnerability management. And I think the two kind of link together because, a lot of patching happens because vulnerabilities are discovered, right? And what I have noticed, especially when I'm working with a lot of clients, is there is this discrepancy between vulnerability management scanning results and patching priorities, which is interesting because I think there should be a consolidation there, right? And I'm not saying one should 100% dictate the other, right? For example, if you find several vulnerabilities on a legacy system that you're about to replace next week, maybe you don't have to worry about patching them because it's going to be replaced, right? So maybe the update is that, okay, we move the replacement up a few days along those lines, right? For the amount of time it would take to patch them, it might take longer to just, do the replacement you're doing. But I still think vulnerability management is something that kind of, especially when it comes to patching and in general, is still kind of viewed as, I don't want to do it, but I have to do. And also, we could take a step back and discuss what is vulnerability management, but that could be a whole other episode based on what you and I are seeing right now,
Yep.
with agents and where they live. But what I've noticed is that this kind of bleeds into the fact that there's this whole idea of vulnerability management that doesn't want to be done, but still needs to be done. And I don't want the idea that comes to mind is kind of like, whew, garbage collection, right? No one wants to do garbage collection, but it has to be done. And as a result, you see some of these, we'll say, garbage empires, right? Where big business around garbage and so forth. And I would say that's similar to vulnerability, right? Vulnerability management. Let's say cybersecurity isn't necessarily the most sexy field, right? But when you're
What?
talking about, I know, right? It's kind of, you know,
Speak for
hey,
yourself, Frank.
yeah, I'm speaking as a guy who really thought the move at one point was let's wear sweater vests everywhere with a tie. So let me tell you, it's
Well, you rocked it,
well,
so
thank you,
let's be honest there.
thank you. But even within that field, I would really like to know your thoughts on vulnerability management because it's kind of this situation where it's not necessarily attractive and it's not really sexy, but it still will and does pay the bills, right? You see that a lot. I see that a lot. I'd like to know your thoughts on that and if you see that changing and evolving, and why do you think it kind of is like that?
Yeah, I think vulnerability management, like most other functions within a holistic cybersecurity program, are following suit with a holistic cybersecurity program, meaning that we have frameworks for them now. We have these maturity assessments for them now for these individual functions within a larger function, right? And so when it comes to vulnerability management, we actually have a maturity. SANS came out with a really good maturity measurement
Yeah.
for that, right? And we utilize that a lot right now in what we currently do. Um, and it's processes, it's procedures, it's technology, it's a mix of everything that people, processes, technology, and governance, right? It's all the things that we usually focus on. Uh, I do see. So the big thing about patching specifically, and really let's say remediation, because vulnerabilities don't necessarily have a patch, all of them, right? Some of them are configuration issues, and one of the biggest ones we see on a daily basis is a configuration issue with let's just say Windows, because let's be honest, that's where it's going to be, right? And with
Right.
communicating with legacy systems, so while you can run a vulnerability scan and you might be able to find some of these issues with a modern day vulnerability scan or modern day vulnerability data from something like a Qualys or Microsoft Defender or Tenable. Um, when you do a pen test, you really see those pop up, and you're like, "Oh, that was a lot more important than we originally thought it was." Right? And so the disconnect here happens, as it so often does, with lanes of responsibility. And this is why having an organization and having a RACI chart and making sure that everybody understands where their different responsibilities lie is a really important thing to have
Yep.
before you even start anything else, right? Like, let's talk about who's responsible for these things and where they need to, and who needs to do what, right? When we find a vulnerability.
Well, that would require
And
organization, Dustin.
yeah, that's right.
And I don't know, but a lot of people are in the business of saying organization, but not
That's right.
necessarily practicing organization.
That's a really, really good point. We all call ourselves organizations, and the deeper and deeper that we all dive into our organizations, we find out how unorganized we are,
Right,
or
one hundred
disorganized
percent.
we are, which is a really interesting phenomena, I think. But I think that's actually more of a luxury, right? Where you can dive in and you can say, "Well, we're not very good at vulnerability management, as an organization, but we're good about being organized in a lot of other ways that a lot of other entities are not." So, really interesting contrast there, but. And so this back to what I was saying, like this is like the contrast between IT and cybersecurity. And that's a really difficult kind of thing to come to grips with as an organization where you're like, well, IT and cybersecurity aren't you guys like the same thing?
Oh
Kind of, but
boy,
not really.
way to
Yeah.
start a fight.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to start a fight definitely
Yeah.
between some organizations here. And then you also have, via research, believe it or not, this isn't anecdotal. This is actually research. Sometimes your IT guy is your cybersecurity guy.
Yep.
Sometimes your COO
Multi-hatted.
is your cybersecurity guy.
Yeah.
Sometimes your CFO is your
And
cybersecurity
that's
guy.
the scariest.
And depending on the size of your organization and the structure, it can be, or it could be a manager of finance, right? It could be someone even lower on the totem pole here that is in charge of cybersecurity initiatives and in charge of, ensuring cybersecurity practices are in place. And that's a really difficult place for a lot of organizations to be in because how much do you pay? Who do you pay? What's the requirement? Here we go back to money again. What's the requirement via regulations? What do you have to have to just to meet bare minimum? What do you have to be doing? And that's kind of the answer there, right? So when we look at it from a maturity perspective or a vulnerability management perspective of maturity of vulnerability management, guess what? Those organizations are going to suffer versus the organization has a FTE full time employee who's going to be able to actually initiate vulnerability management, keep an eye on it, keep an eye on IT, making sure that the patches are being rolled out and being put on, making sure the configurations are being changed to what they need to be changed, or if those configurations and patches can't happen for one reason or another, then mitigating controls are in place, right? And then we get into risk, and now we're back up into a different level of the organization. So it's this kind of cross talk that we have happening within an organization, and making sure that that crosstalk is properly documented and that everybody understands what their role is within that, right? Because otherwise, the IT guy can be like, "Well, this isn't my job. This is vulnerability management. I'm not patching these systems." And it's
Oh
like,
my
"No, well, actually,
gosh.
patching
Yeah.
is IT's job." Well, no, it's not. Let's stop the fight at the beginning and say, here are your roles and responsibilities.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's move on and get our work done.
Well, okay, and I like that you brought that up because it's I think prioritization is key and so forth. And a pitfall that I think some organizations often fall into is the prioritization trap. Because you gave a lot of threads to pull there, and I want to pull that one because a lot of my clients, right, and yours, I'm sure you've seen too, really, I don't. It's either a product of being overworked, overwhelmed, not understanding the problem appropriately, any kind of combination of factors, but they'll just kind of default on whatever's presented to them as far as priority, right? And they won't take critical. They won't take critical thinking to critical level vulnerabilities, as it were, right? Uh, what are your thoughts on? So I think I kind of give myself away there that vulnerabilities shouldn't be viewed in a vacuum. They should be viewed in context, especially the organization. But how do you feel about the NVD, designations as a default for vulnerabilities when they're discovered? And for those who that don't know, I'm sorry if I'm, abbreviating too much. That's the National Vulnerability Database that has all the vulnerabilities that are formally documented and explained and so forth. They apply a criticality level to them as well. Is it a critical vulnerability, meaning let's hurry up, right, all the way down to a low criticality, which a lot of organizations, in my experience, may not even address. What do you feel about? How do you feel about the NVD and its diagnosis of vulnerabilities, and is it a good baseline? Is it still an applicable baseline? How should it be applied?
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. And NVD focuses mostly, not focuses mostly, but I would say, a big thing that comes out of that is the CVSS score, right, of a vulnerability. Which I wish I could tell you what that stands for on the top of my head.
Common
Common
vulnerability. Wait,
vulnerability.
we have the internet. It's common
Yeah.
vulnerability scoring system. Common vulnerability.
Scoring system.
Listen,
So
all those
simple.
people out there that are working in cyber, you can still be in here for almost 20 years and forget abbreviations, despite you. Hey,
Every day.
we have certifications. We know. You don't need to remember.
And advanced degrees.
Yeah, we're professionals. This is a legitimate
Oh my goodness.
cybersecurity podcast. We're legitimate.
Oh, here
Um,
we go. And we just
so
failed.
yeah,
Um,
well,
yes.
we may have failed, but we failed legitimately. So there
Yes.
we go.
There we
Anyway,
go. I like it.
sorry. Please continue.
No, so I think the most commonly used version is 3.1 right now, and I think we're up to 4.0 now. That's being rolled out. Look, those are great for the individual vulnerabilities themselves on the individual systems themselves. Where them we kind of fall to the wayside on using that as something to base our criticality for our organization is the asset that it's installed that it affects, right, or the assets that they affect. Meaning that let's say you have a very highly rated vulnerability, meaning that it's very easily exploitable. There might be a publicly available exploit for it. Any script kiddie with Metasploit can get on there and get to it. But it's an internal machine that's not accessible by the outside at all. It's behind 10 different firewalls. It's got IAM of the wazoo. And nobody gets to access it except for this one role per month or something like that.
Right.
Guess what? That criticality goes down exponentially at that point. Meanwhile, you're ignoring something with like a mid-level criticality that's sitting out on the internet right now, right? So how do you come to grips with that? How do you rectify, or what's the word I'm looking for? How do you like level the playing field here and say, all right, external device can be exploited, has a publicly available exploit, but it's really hard to do, or whatever the criticality rating is kind of lower on it because of that. But that's the one you need to pay attention to because that's where the foothold happens, right? That's where the bad guys are. Every day, if you have any cloud instance that has a publicly available IP address, any VPS, virtual private server that's out there that has a publicly available IP address, you're going to see a ridiculous amount of packets coming from a ridiculous amount of geographical places. Let's just put it that way, very specific geographical places, but also from security researching firms within the United States.
Right.
Shodan constantly scanning, right? We have all
Shout
these,
out to Shodan, still
yeah,
the OG, still going strong.
that's right. We have all these things for good and bad that are out there. All these crawlers for good and for evil that are out there, good and bad that are out there doing their thing, and reporting back to whatever entity they report back to and saying, "Yep, port 45 is open, which is this, and it's actually we enumerated it. It's running this version, and it's got this vulnerability on it, and that can be exploited by a bad guy, right?" So is that really what you need to pay attention to? Yeah, probably, as opposed to the one that's behind a million firewalls and has a bunch of compensating controls on it. And this is defense in depth. We have all these sayings and all this terminology within the cybersecurity field to explain why you don't need to worry about that. You still got to worry about it. Still, it's like a risk register, right? Risks need to be on the risk register, regardless of whether they're super low, regardless of whether they're um, detrimental. Obviously that needs to be on there, but all these things need to be on there because you need to constantly go back and revisit those risks too, and say like, oh, has this changed? Has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse? Can we, start putting more resources towards other things? So it's so funny because this gets to a point, and I think we're going to get to talk about this a little bit, but where we're no longer really talking about cybersecurity as a core. Now we're talking about business and organizational status as the core competency to what a person
Oh
has
yeah.
to be able to function with. So
Well, I think
it
competence is important for anyone to function. Yeah, I'm just
but
going to
it
throw that
quickly
one out there.
changes.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen this where it quickly changes from you have to be technically competent, and now you have to be businessly competent. And I'm sure that's a very technical term I just used, but and correct term.
Yeah,
But
patent
what do
pending.
you usually see? Like when you, because you do a lot of this, you do a lot of translating technical issues into corporate speak with your main role.
That's true. I did not see myself being at this point in my life when I was, 4 and thought astronaut was a good idea. You know, I never, well, I think it was when I was 12. I said, well, when I grow up, I want to have engaging discussions about key technical issues in such a manner that individuals can understand no matter their background, especially if they are of an executive board nature. Yes, truly, this is how I can serve the community. No, I never said that. But you're right. That's exactly, ironically, one of the things that can lead to that struggle and that understanding of to understanding of the vulnerabilities, like you say, right? You can have the
Yeah.
worst vulnerability in the world, and you and I have both seen it. But if you have, if you drag Igor out of the closet, who found it, can actually fix it, and put them in front of the board, where they say, "Okay, bud," and like some kind of, circus barker, behold our technical man named Igor who found the hack. Tell him, Igor. They'd be like, it's on port 22, and we haven't updated. Right. So if you do that, they're not going to understand, and they're also going to tell you you're fired. And where did you find that? What you just showed us? No, you're really correct. I think communication is key there, and the understanding and getting the appropriate designation and prioritization of these, vulnerabilities, of these risks, and so forth. Because if you can't communicate, I'll be honest. When there was a short time when I graduated with that English degree where I thought maybe I did make a mistake in life, and they were right. It was when I was putting in my application to sell suits at the big box store, which, no shade on anyone there, it's a good idea. You get a discount on suits. But thankfully, I've been able to use that capability to successfully communicate some of the technical issues to individuals to help them understand the criticality of the situation and the
Right.
seriousness of the situation before the criticality is taken advantage of. I think a lot of times in this industry, you have organizations that don't understand how bad a situation is until it's been exploited. And by then, I mean, everyone knows, right? I really like your point there that it is organizational as well as technical, because that understanding is what's important, not just in this field but in other fields, right? And even fields that you and I have like no understanding of. I mean, some may say we are not financial experts, and that's something you won't get on this show. We will not give you financial advice. We might say financial things,
Oh.
but I can tell you if there's one person who has experienced financial, we'll say, dynamism with me, it's been Dustin. When some days Dustin and Frank get a good idea, and during the pandemic they try to build, I don't know, a crypto miner, and we did not
Mhm.
try. We
Oh yeah,
succeeded, by the way.
we
We
succeeded.
succeeded, but it might have been thinking that we could out Ponzi the Ponzi scheme, where we might have gone a little wrong there, where we could have pulled the rug first when we didn't even make the rug. The rug pullers are those that weave it. By the way, this is my official crypto advice, which is not financial advice. And that's why you don't listen to any of the financial advice you get here. But anyway, so as I was saying, organizations sell crypto. No, I'm just joking. Organizations and the communication and the understanding of these vulnerabilities is important. And I think you make a really valid point there. And that kind of leads into another topic, because something that a lot of organizations are discussing now is AI, right? And I love it, right? I think it's
Mhm.
fantastic. I'll have whoever's to the two people listening to this. One first, thanks, Jared. He's a wonderful brother-in-law who is very supportive, and I guarantee you we will have at least one listener, Dustin. Um, but to anyone listening to this, well, our main producer here is AI, right? That's one of the things. One of the things
Mhm.
Dustin and I like to do is we've spent so much of our career trying to. It's almost like we can't help ourselves, right? Where there's new tech and we want to play with it, we want to find it, we
Yes.
want to take it apart. A fun
Yep.
story that I like to tell people about me and Dustin is when we first started working together and hanging out. We had to do it was 6, but overall it was an 8-week engagement out in Hawaii for the Department of
Terrible
Defense.
place.
What's that?
Terrible place.
Yeah,
How dare they send us to
terrible
Hawaii
place to send work. You know
for
what?
8
I'll
weeks?
take it, buddy. After all the war
Oh, yeah.
zones they sent us to, I'll take the Hawaii trip. All right. And it's not like
No,
we were
Hawaii is
there
an absolutely lovely place.
on
I'm
vacation. We
being
were
very
still working.
sarcastic here.
Yeah.
Yes.
A
Go back in a
beautiful
heartbeat.
place. Beautiful
Yeah.
place. Anyway, one of my favorite stories is to get to the point of tech is the Raspberry Pi had just come out, and there was a magazine where they were giving away Raspberry Pis in the magazine because that was kind of part of the gimmick, right? It's a small chipset that if you bought the magazine, it'd be inside too. I took this joker miles through Honolulu, checking all these Barnes and Nobles, and at the time Borders was still open, to find a magazine that had it, and we just couldn't. And that gets to the point, like, it was the cutting tech at the edge tech at the time. I was like, we got to find this. We got to take it forward. We have
Yeah.
to understand it better. And that's the same thing with AI. And I feel that like AI is integrated. It is still emerging. Geez, it's always going to be everyone's going to be like, it's still emerging. It's more now. It's AG.
It's a fair statement to make though, Frank. And you know what? The cloud is still emerging too. So I'm not.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Now it's a
It's been
cumulative.
around for a long. 2006, I think, is when the cloud was inceptualized, if that's a word.
Yeah, sure. So, or if you're Larry Ellison, right? Or was it Page? I don't know. Pick a Larry, right? Where they were like, we made the cloud in the 80s.
Right.
Fun.
Fair enough.
Great.
Yeah.
AI though is the current, tech that you're hearing more and more executives talk, and thankfully are concerned about in boardrooms, right? Because while they love the capabilities that it can provide, there is this understanding that it could also be some type of threat as well, especially an insider threat. And I think that is an important discussion for a lot of different reasons. And and I know you and I have discussed it too. What do you see AI as? And I don't want to limit it to an insider threat, as an inside and external threat. I'd love to get your opinion because it's a really good topic. What are your thoughts on that, and where do you see it going?
It's the biggest problem that I think that modern day CISOs are having to come to grips with is that everybody's using AI. We got to keep up with our competitors. So how do we implement it here while also keeping it below budget, right? So here's the B word again, below budget, but also making sure that the data that we're typing into it isn't shared or isn't hackable or isn't be able to be used by a nefarious actor to do some nefarious thing. So that's the big thing is the data. It's a DLP issue, right? It's a data loss prevention issue. So and a staying in budget issue. So of course everybody can go and pay Microsoft or OpenAI or Grok or whoever else, an exorbitant amount of money to have their own instance where it's a privately hosted instance of AI of a large language model that they can put any information into, but it all stays within that model. Now, that's not usually a viable capability for a lot of organizations that aren't Fortune 500 companies to do. Right? It's expensive. And so, what can they do? So, can you have individual instances of ChatGPT? Sure. But just know that data, you got to look at the data privacy, right? You got to look at those the terms of service and everything else that kind of goes into that, and make sure that the data is staying where it needs to stay. On the flip side of that, like for someone to kind of take advantage of it, I don't personally have any experience with this, but I have talked to people in the industry who their job is to see how they can basically poison AI. So think of like an ARP poison attack or a DHCP poison attack or something like that. Or I'm sorry, DNS poisoning attack or something like that. This same kind of idea where you can feed AI. If you kind of know where AI is going to go and look for information, you can start feeding it with, SEO and other capabilities. Start feeding it wrong information, and then the data that comes back is going to be wrong when you ask it, right? And so we see
Not
this a
just
lot, and don't
hallucinating, but
and and
wrong.
I do have conversations with my family all the time where they're like, sometimes sometimes ChatGPT is wrong, and I'm like, I know. Sometimes
Suffer.
I'll and with like things that it probably shouldn't be now, and that's something else that's really important to recognize here is that we are talking about large language models. We're not talking about like I don't know, like huge neural networks that have the ability to, have critical thinking the same as a human. That's not what this is. It's large language model is exactly what it sounds like. It can write things really good.
Again, and to be
better
fair,
than what I just said.
and to be fair, sometimes I'm wrong about things I shouldn't be
Sure.
either, right? I feel like there's this this is not a defense of AI, by the way, by any stretch of the imagination. But I think there is this almost active desire to poke holes in it, right? Out of
Yes.
fear, even when it's factually correct, right? And I'm not saying it should undergo scrutiny. It should be observed. It should be criticized, right? However, just because it's wrong about some things, it is not it's not a default tool. I think and it gets to a bigger point on tech. So many people view it as magic fix button, right? They want to be able to just trust AI in certain ways, but then also they are afraid of AI. So any small error, they'll
Right.
jump all over it. Sorry, continue, please.
No, you're right. I mean, that's the Sherlock Holmes adage, right? Like somebody, somebody's more likely to is more likely to want to contradict you than tell you something, than talk to a stranger about something they don't know, right? Someone they don't know about something they don't know.
Exactly.
So, it is an interesting kind of like human psyche thing that happens there. We're all like, oh, we're smarter than the AI. It's like, yeah, we're all smarter than the AI right now because it's nothing. It's just
I don't know, Dustin. There's some of us I'm not sure are smarter than the AI. Uh,
uh,
I
fair
meet
enough.
people.
What is funny though is that when you point out that AI is wrong, and I've done this on several instances because I do use it a lot. I use OpenAI a lot in my professional and personal life, where I'm like, "Ooh, that you're not really right on that because of A, B, and C," and I'll be like, "You're right. I'm not right about this because of A, B, and C." It
Or
kind of comes
that's a
back, and it's
great
like,
point. I am incorrect. Yeah.
right, yeah, it's like even with coding, like I've had to do some coding for me, and I'm like, "Hey, that you didn't put the semicolon at the end of like really simple things," and it's like, you're correct, I didn't do that. It's just like it's very accepting of when it's wrong, which is actually good modeling for us, right? Like
Yeah.
we all need to
Oh
be able to
man.
accept when we're wrong, like when you and I forgot what CVSS stood for a while ago, which nobody's ever going to remember. But it's always good to kind of like take a step back and realize that expertise is one of those things that you're still constantly learning, right? We're always still constantly learning, and ChatGPT is constantly learning too. But anyway, back to AI.
Yes.
So that's again the DLP issue,
Right.
the poisoning issue. That's kind of where I see the biggest problems being with AI being used in an organization, and just making sure that you do have that human element that's double checking what it's saying. What about you? What do you think?
I agree with you on all of those. I also really like the idea that I'm going to take the external view because you covered the internal very well, right? Uh, I also think it's an interesting consideration to discuss when evaluating external attackers and external threats, because now you have AIs that are learning how to attack. What was it? I want to say it was earlier. It was not earlier this year. It might have been last year, where there was the first documented instance of an AI coming up with its own new exploitation, right?
Mm,
Which
okay.
was pretty impressive, right?
Yeah.
And very worrying, because it is now showing that it can. So where the AI is kind of bleeding between the lines, right? It's blurring the lines between, is AI the tool or is it the threat actor in certain instances? In that kind of case, right? What is it? And it gets to a whole other discussion of what is an actor, what is thought here, what's the purpose of doing this. Anyway, that's a whole other discussion. But seeing the way that it's attacking from the outside
Right.
shows that you have a new tool and or threat actor, if left unmitigated in certain environments, that can pose an additional item on your risk register, as we discussed earlier, that should be taken seriously. So you have this, we'll call it noun, right? This capability that is both an insider threat and an outsider threat. Which arguably the insider threat is also an outsider threat, depending on why they got there. We'll use
Sure.
hacktivist plants and stuff like that. Well, they're an insider threat. Well, actually, their whole goal was to get hired so they could exploit you. So, are they an insider threat or the outsider? It's a whole catch-22 kind of
Oh
thing,
yeah.
and we'll save that for the
For the lawyers.
philosophers. Yeah, yes, the lawyers, who are arguably, man, that's not, are lawyers modern day philosophers? Maybe food for thought,
There's a
philosophy
lot of
majors.
interpreting of things that are going on there. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
So
Abstract interpreting.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I think that's what's really great about it. I, so I think that's what's really great about it. I do kind of. I really enjoyed your point of people poking holes in it. People want to contradict more than if they don't understand something, they really want to contradict it, which I find fascinating, because one could make the statement that an individual should be concerned about trying to contradict something before they fully understand it, right? Because if you contradict something without fully understanding, perhaps there's a level of ignorance that can be pointed out there, right?
Sure.
Depending on the situation. So I find that a fascinating aspect of it, and this is completely separate from the point of AI and the specific use of business. But I think that as it grows, it's important for organizations and individuals both to understand, not just be. I feel like there is a sentiment right now to either ignore it, right? And I'll say in everyday life there, and this may be generational as well, but ignore it and the benefits that it can bring and the threats that it can impose, or you'll have fully embrace it, but very few are willing to completely scrutinize and understand it in order to best implement it or best, we'll say, corral it. I think it's fascinating that when you're talking about having your own instances and you can have your own AIs hosted in the cloud with your own governance and so forth, keeping things, you can use it safely.
Hmm.
And one of the examples I love is watching, because this is how I like to spend my nights on YouTube, microcomputers and especially Raspberry Pis, where you can make your own AI and have it host on
Yeah.
Raspberry Pi. It's a dumb AI, right? But
Yeah.
it is an AI that is functional and it's amazing. And it really gives individuals and anyone a glimpse into the fact and helps them understand the fact, oh, it's just more code. It's just a
Hmm.
new tool. I mean, if guys, if you can host a new capability like an advanced capability like AI on a Raspberry Pi, yes, you should be careful, and yes, it's still worth taking seriously. But two, it's not necessarily something to be scared of, right? It's not magic. It's not, some mythical thing that can attack you. But
Yeah.
it is worth considering in the boardroom. Anyway, we've gone long. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
We'll
No, that's
let's
good.
slice and dice this and see what happens. Maybe we'll have another episode. Maybe not. Who knows what'll happen with this? But for anyone who decided to listen, thank you. I don't know if we put it on YouTube, like and subscribe. That's still a thing, right? I mean, I do it. I feel like anytime we
Smash
want to.
that subscribe button, buddy.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
If you
what you
made
gotta
it this
say.
far and and hit that bell for notifications, right? Um, I don't even know if we're going to put this on YouTube. Who knows? Maybe. But thank you for listening. And if you have ideas for additional discussions or things you want to hear me and Dustin discuss, reach out to us through whatever mechanism we share. That a TBD there. But thank you and have a good one. We'll talk to you soon.